Hi, how are you?
I'm good. Thank you for wanting to do this and reaching out.
Absolutely. I'm super excited. Are you excited for the event?
I am, yes, very much so. And I think I'm familiar with NUVO. It's a newspaper too, isn't it? Like
Yeah.
entertainment.
We don't print anymore, unfortunately. It's all online.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's,
Sign of the times.
yes, yeah. I used to write travel articles for magazines, and now that's mostly online stuff.
Yeah. Do you still do that?
I haven't in several years, but I had a good run at it. It was fun. I got sent to many exotic places.
Fun. That's awesome. That's one of my favorite things about writing, I think, is like some of the stuff that you get to go do. I got to go see Pink. That was really cool.
Ooh, nice.
Do you want to introduce yourself and kind of tell everybody about the event that's coming up at Skyline?
Okay. Hi there, I'm Brinke Stevens, and I'm going to be appearing at the Shelbyville, Indiana Drive-In Extravaganza on November 1st and 2nd with Jill Sholin, who's been in Stepfather, Popcorn Society, and so on. And on Saturday, our special guest is Joe Bob Briggs. So I'm very excited about being there, and I hope you'll all come out to the Skyline Drive-In on November 1st and 2nd.
Awesome.
Thank you.
What I'm kind of excited about is that Joe Bob used to submit stories to NUVO, and so we published, his reviews, his drive-in reviews, in some of the like first, if I'm not mistaken, the actual first print ever of NUVO had one of his drive-in reviews in it.
Wow, what a coincidence. Yeah, he's a wonderful writer. I read a lot of his hardcover books early on, and he's so funny, such a great humorist. And I worked with him several times. I flew to Dallas to do his drive-in theater show. And I was just in Las Vegas at another Joe Bob Jamboree where he inducted me into the Screen Queen Hall of Fame, which had not previously existed. He made it up just for me and my Screen Queen trio.
That's epic, though. You said you've worked with him a lot, but is this going to be your first time at the Skyline?
Yes, this will be my first time at the Skyline Drive-In, and I think it's wonderful that drive-in theaters still exist. I've done several. It's like a new trend to have film festivals at drive-ins, the whole nostalgia part
Mhm.
of that. So I've done the Mahoning Drive-In in Pennsylvania and another one in Scranton. I did the Westwind Drive-In in Las Vegas, and now Shelbyville. So it's exciting. I love watching movies on the big screen late at night.
It is really exciting. They do a lot of really cool stuff there, and I think the cool thing about the Skyline is it has a very big horror fan base where, some of the other drive-ins, they're just, they're drive-in that you go to see new movies, but like, if you go to the Skyline, you're gonna get to catch, some older, you know, even B movie that, and that's always fun, because I think there's something about being a part of movies that aren't, necessarily the biggest hits when they come out, but then you get a cult following, kind of like, obviously you guys did pretty well when you were when they released Slumber Party, but uh, you got a cult following from that. Did you kind of expect that from that kind of movie, or how did that come about, or how does that feel for you?
Back in the 80s, when I did slasher movies and horror comedies, we all thought it was very disposable stuff that in a few years no one would remember it. But thanks to nostalgia and love for the 80s, a lot of people have rediscovered our movies. The first film they're showing on Friday night is Slumber Party Massacre, which was my very first feature film. And it's still the one that I'm probably best associated with. People say, Bring Stevens from Slumber Party Massacre. So it was really unusual for its time. It was written and directed by women. And it was a slasher horror film, which I didn't realize since it was my first movie, how rare and wonderful that was. And
Yeah.
I've seen it a lot lately because we're celebrating the 40th anniversary. I've done it with a few film festivals, and the movie still holds up. That's what amazes me. It's a little dated, but it's so well done that it really holds up. And the other thing I discovered after watching and rewatching it was that the women have very strong roles. They almost play the guy roles because they're talking about sports, they're talking about men in a sexy way, they're wearing sports jerseys. So the women are really strong in that movie.
Yeah, I think that's something that is sticks out a lot is the lineup of just looking between the cast and production and there's a lot of women. It was a lot of women involved. Not to say that there weren't men, but we like a place where women get to step in and have their power moment.
Absolutely, and that's rare in horror movies because there aren't a lot of female directors. And I got to do it too. Recently, I wrote, directed, and starred in Personal Demons, which came out on the Terror Tunes 4 anthology DVD. And in 2022, I directed Sorority Babes 2. Now, at the drive-in on the second night, we're showing the first Sorority
Yeah,
Babes. And Charlie Van from Full Moon called me up and he said, I'm going to remake Sorority Babes. And I said, well, why are you telling me this? I died in the first movie. And he said, no, 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 I want you to direct the second one. And I'm like, oh, okay. So that was a wonderful thing. I really enjoyed doing that. We shot it in Cleveland, Ohio, over a grand total of 6 days. But despite
nice.
the constraints, I really enjoyed the experience. And I think I did a pretty good job directing it.
I think you did great.
Thank you.
Looking at I mean, because obviously I was reading about, you started out, you were in Mensa and then, wanted to be a marine biologist and you kind of did this whole flip and then acting and then, now you write and you're also producing and directing. What's been your favorite of all the things that you've ever, been a part of? How did you?
I love my entire life. It's been so interesting and diverse. I loved being a scientist. I was working with seals and dolphins and sea otters. Marine mammals are great, but fate just had its own plans in mind for me. And I married my college sweetheart, Dave Stevens, moved to Los Angeles, accidentally became an actress. I never aspired to do it. And then suddenly I'm a scream queen. So I got pigeonholed and kind of trapped in the genre, but I couldn't have asked for better because the horror field is so wonderful. The fans really make it, and they're quirky, intelligent, knowledgeable people who adore you for the rest of your life. It doesn't matter when you get older, they still are fans. And that's one thing I really appreciate about horror fans is that they're so loyal and devoted.
I think that shows over and over, especially at events like this, because you really do see people that, come out and they know the most random things about you that you're like, how do you know that? Where
And
did you see that movie?
yeah,
And
and
I mean, you have hundreds, right, of projects that
yes,
you've been in.
well, yes, they and the fans are knowledgeable across the board, where they can talk about any horror movie. And it's just astounding to me the collective knowledge of the industry, of the genre that they have. Yeah, and I've been in probably now 250 movies, and it's a living or a dying. I've died in most of my films if I haven't been killing other people in them.
That's fair. um, you had a pretty active role in Comic-Con for some years as well, right?
Yes, I was actually one of the original founding members of Comic Con. I came in the third year when it really started to leave the college campus and become a real show. And I entered in the masquerade contest as Vampirella in 1974, and I won first place. So they promptly put me in charge of running the masquerade. I was 19 years old. I had no idea how to do this, but we were all teenagers. And I did it for the next 10 years, running their masquerade contest, which is kind of famous now because it's such an extravaganza.
Yeah. How do fans of Comic-Con kind of compare to fans of the horror genre?
Well, obviously, comic books and horror are linked and related, like Creepy and Eerie and
Mhm.
Vampirella and all those wonderful horror comics. The great thing about Comic Con is it appeals to such a wide range of tastes. There's anime and there's so many different things, celebrities. Um, but I did my own comic book. I always wanted to, and I was married to Dave Stevens, a comic book artist, and modeled for him for the first 10 years of his producing work. I was pretty much all of his female figures with different faces and hair colors. But I did my own comic book in the late 90s called First one was Brink of Eternity, and then a three-part miniseries called Brink of Destruction. And I wanted to do another trilogy called Brink of Madness, but the bottom dropped out of the comic industry in the late 90s, and it just wasn't financially rewarding enough to invest in that.
Do you see kind of the same as with records and I mean not as much with CDs, but a lot with like records and even VHS. Do you see maybe a future again for comic books?
Yeah, it's possible. Like we talked about earlier, print magazines and newspapers are disappearing, and the online thing is what's happening now. When I first started, all movies were made on 35 millimeter, and you could only watch them in theaters, later on television, but you couldn't own them. And then in the 80s, home video became popular, and they started putting out VHS. VHS morphed into DVDs, and now it's streaming. So I carry a lot of product when I can get it, selling DVDs of my movies at conventions and film festivals. But I'm finding that the younger audiences don't want to own stuff. They'd rather watch it on streaming. And I think that's really interesting. It probably has a lot to do with living in small spaces, moving around a lot, not having a lot of money. So, like, I'll point to Sorority Babes too and say, oh, this is my most recent thing. I directed it. And they'll go, yeah, yeah, I saw it for free on Tubi. And they won't buy it. So it's kind of interesting how the technology has changed so much in the 40 years that I've been in the business.
I
Yeah.
think there's just something that we know about having that like tangible copy um, that I hope will find its way back to everyone of all ages because I think even they see it with video games, you know, like they buy that copy of that video game and it only exists on whatever console they purchased it on.
Hmm.
And so it's similar. I think I want to believe that there's hope that they'll realize that the tangible things are the things, you know, to try to have because like
Right.
I held on to a VHS copy of The Nightmare Before Christmas before it ever said Disney on it anywhere, but real small on the back. I've held on to that forever because you know that those eventually one day someone's going to find value in that because you know even Disney figured out there was value in that. So I
Yeah.
hope
So
that that
you're
gives you a
absolutely right, though, that the issue is technology, where I made all these really fun mixtapes of 80s music on cassettes. And I have
nice.
absolutely no way to play them because I have no cassette recorders at work anymore. And VHS, I had two VHS recorders, both of them broke, and I have no way to play VHS. So I know there's revivals where, like vinyl records. My young niece said, we're in a record club. And I said, what does that mean? And she said, well, we put a record player in the center of the floor and we all sit around it in a circle and we listen to vinyl. And I'm like, oh, that's really cool.
We used to do that at sleepovers on the floor. No big
Yeah.
deal.
Yeah. So there's always fans of technology. I even sign a lot of laser discs. And
Awesome.
who has the ability to play laser discs? So it's really based on the technology, and you can own something, but will you be able to play it in the future?
Yeah, that's fair. That
And
is fair.
that's one thing I really like about these drive-in events is because you get to see movies on the big screen. And I hardly ever get to do that. My first few movies, like Slumber Party, played in theaters. Slave Girls from Beyond Infinity, 1987, was probably the last movie I ever saw in a theater. And then you're just watching them on the small screen in your living room. So I love being at a drive-in where it's bigger than life and you can just appreciate it in a way that maybe you weren't able to when the movie first came out on video.
Give you,
Yeah.
you know, now you pull your phone in so you can see the stuff, but you don't, when it's up on the big screen, you can almost see the little, you know, the string or the extra piece. And to horror fans, that stuff isn't ruined by that. It's heightened because then you're like, oh, that's how they did that. And I
Right.
think such a cool thing. What was it like to turn around and you know even kind of looking at how things change? You had 20 years between the first massacre and doing cheerleader massacre. How was that different and how did that compare and was you know how do you feel about those two different experiences?
Oh, you're referring to Jim Wynorski's Cheerleader Massacre?
Yeah.
Okay, well, in the very first movie, Slumber Party Massacre 1, um, presumably Linda dies. I mean, she escapes, runs around from this driller killer, and he brings the girl through the door, and her arm is all bloody, and she screams bloody murder, but you never actually see her die. So Jim Wynorski had an idea of what if she was horribly mangled, but she lived. So he brings the Linda character back in Cheerleader Massacre. And I was wearing a sundress. And I said, well, don't you think I should have like this horrible scar on my arm to really sell it? And he's like, we don't have time for that. Just shoot it. So, it would have been nice. It would have really tied it together. But I was essentially playing the same character as if she had lived.
Did you was there anything about that character that you felt like you kind of saw in yourself or um
I
that
had,
resonated with you?
yeah, I'd never really acted before. I'd only done one student film and a few extras, non-speaking roles in movies. But it was my first speaking part. I'd never run from a serial killer. I'd never screamed. I'd never died in a movie. And I'd never even taken acting classes. So it was all quite a revelation where it just came out. I never knew that I had that ability. And I was just had it. I was able to do it. So I thought, well, I did okay in that. Let's just keep acting until somebody says, you're not a real actor. Get out of here. And nobody ever did. So I'm still doing it.
That's awesome. That's a really cool way to look at it too. Does that kind of play into like advice that you give when someone says, "Yeah, I want to grow up and do what you do"?
Yeah, it's not so easy now to follow in my footsteps because of the video revolution in the 80s. Suddenly, there were video stores, mom and pop stores and Blockbuster, and they needed product. So it became like factories churning out dozens of movies a year. And I really got a lot of work in that time. And then I built up a good reputation. So now the backyard filmmakers all over the country hire me as usually a cameo. I work one day a week if I'm lucky. But yeah, it would be really hard to duplicate my career path. My suggestion to young actresses would be to sign up with any casting agencies in your area. Try to find an agent if you can, even an extra casting agent, just being on sets, and go to fan conventions. There's often a lot of filmmakers there who are either speaking or showing their movies, or they've set up a table to sell their product. And talk to filmmakers, have a little card with a resume on it or a link, and pursue it that way. It takes footwork.
Yeah, definitely. But that's great advice. I think a lot of the time you get kind of like a mixed answer with that because they're like, oh, I don't know. I don't know what to say, or it's so different now. And um, you kind of go, well, there has to be something. I mean, what are you still doing? And I think that's great, solid advice. So I appreciate that. I'm sure that others will too. Uh, Thinking about that, what do you see for the future of making movies? I know we talked about, how they're different now. Do you think that movies are going to move to this AI situation where, people don't make movies anymore? I've heard so many theories. What do you think is in store for the future of the movie industry?
Well, the whole AI thing is, the jury's still out on that. Everyone's concerned about it. Animators, writers, actors. Um, it remains to be seen. But for me, I'm still working. This has been an amazingly busy year where I've done almost a dozen movies and a dozen fan conventions and film festivals, which is so wonderful that I can still be working all these years later. I did a true crime drama called Kemper for director Chad Farron, and I'm about to shoot a second film for him called Dorothea, another true crime drama. And
Nice.
in both of them, I play victims. Um, and then I shot a really cool movie called Mary Day and the Scream Queens, which will be out sometime next year. I was in the remake of Spider Baby and also in the remake of House on Haunted Hill. So I keep getting offered these fabulous projects. And just this week alone, I've had 4 voiceover jobs. I do a lot of voiceover work I built my own studio in my second bedroom, my office. So I've played a drive time disc jockey. I've played a call-in radio caller. I played a woman on the phone whose mother's ashes have been stolen from a funeral parlor. And I get all the
Oh,
fun jobs. I also record audiobooks when I have spare time.
like any that you would recommend people to
Yeah, if
read?
you go on audible.com, there's a series I did called Darkness Unbound for author Glenn Porzig.
Okay.
And I recorded, I don't know, four, five, or six of the series for him. And it's about a supernatural detective. And each book is a different spooky case that he's working on. They're quite interesting.
Nice. I feel like true crime and horror just go, hand in hand. You get a lot of the same fan base.
They
More
do.
women probably on the true crime side.
Yeah, and the wonderful thing about true crime stories is that they're real. They really happen. And you have the challenge of duplicating the time period, the wardrobe, making the characters try to look like they did back in the 70s or 80s whenever these killings happened.
Hmm.
So it's a little more of a challenge, but just the fact that it's real and you're watching events unfold that actually happened, it's a little bit edgier than just a slasher movie where you know it's all
Hmm.
made up.
Yeah, I always tell people when they ask what my favorite monster is, I always say humans because they're the scariest people of all. But I
Yeah.
watch a lot of true crime for
Okay.
that, I guess. I
It's
feel like
become,
there's a generation of unsolved mysteries children that grew up and just couldn't pull themselves from that, like true crime, weird, paranormal.
yeah.
I love it. Yeah.
True crime is very, very popular right now. There was an explosion of podcasts and books and things like that. So I'm excited about Kemper and Dorothea to see what they look like when they're done.
That's gonna be awesome. What's been your favorite role so far? That in any of the characters that you've ever played, small or big?
Well, I always say I like Haunting Fear as one of my favorite movies because I go slowly crazy in it and I live till the end. I don't die. And I got to work with Jen Michael Vincent and Karen Black. The script was written by Fred Olen Ray. So it was a lot of fun to do that. And it was my biggest role at the time.
Fred is such a nice guy. I actually just got to meet him at the last event.
Ah, cool. Did you get to interview him?
I did, yeah. I interviewed him as the preview, the same thing we're doing now, but for the last event. So that
Uh-huh.
was cool.
I just finished his autobiography called Hellbent for Hollywood, and he's had such a fascinating life, and he's such a driven person to succeed. He's just amazing to me.
He told me a story about um, how basically when everything was really happening for him, it kind of didn't feel like it at that time because you're struggling for money and you're really trying to figure out how you fit into that world. And he said that he had a small child and he was a single dad, and uh, I have all those things that I go, and so it kind of I felt like that was super cool to hear somebody be that candid about just how they felt going through the rise to from starting to where they were. And I think that was kind of cool to give hope
Yeah.
to people. Yeah.
His life has been about balance of responsibility as a single dad and a parent and taking risks, which he's done, like investing his own money in movies, some of which flopped. He never made his money back, but he never gave up. And he took advantage of any circumstances that could advance his career. And he did a lot of stuff that people will never know about, like um, fix-its on other movies, other people's movies and stuff. But I think he's got a tremendous body of work, and I've been in a lot of his films. I would say eight, nine, 10 of his movies. So it's really fun to work with him.
Yeah, he's funny too. I think it's nice to see, so there's a lot of very serious directors. I think it seems like anyone that, because Jay was there also and he was talking, and I mean, they just have such chemistry. I think it's obvious that he working with him is probably um, a good time, not that he's not serious about what he does, but just that he has fun while he does it.
And Jay Richardson, the actor, oh my goodness, I've worked with him numerous times. And in Las Vegas last week, I just saw Teenage Exorcist, which I'd written the screenplay on that. And Jay played my husband. And he's been my husband in Haunting Fear and a number of other movies. He was my boyfriend in Bad Girls from Mars. And he's just so funny. I loved him in Hollywood Chainsaw Hookers as a 40s private eye. He's such a
Perfect.
good
He
actor.
wore the hat to the event.
Yeah, he's a wonderful actor. He always delivers.
That's your work husband then.
Yes, yes.
He's great. I thought they were both just so much fun.
Mhm.
Um, I think one of the other things I was interested, but I don't, I think I already know what you're going to say, but are there any projects that you, or anything that you ever did in your career that you regret doing?
Hmm. Um, no, I've been injured on some films. I've been through hard circumstances like 20-hour shooting days with no food. So if I could redo things, there are certain jobs I might not have accepted. But for the most part, you just never know what you're going to
Yeah.
encounter. And you really have to look out for yourself. So I always bring my own food and I always try to be very careful about stunts and things like that. Like there was one movie where they wanted to squib me where I get shot. And I told the special effects guy, you need to put the squib on your stomach first. And I want to see. And sure enough, it burned a big hole in his stomach. It would have been too much gunpowder. So then he, lessened the amount on it. But that's the kind of thing you have to do sometimes is say, wait a minute, before you do that to me, I want to see you do it to yourself.
Yeah, advocating for yourself, I think, is one of the hardest things to do. Uh,
Hmm.
and sometimes that's where I think you learn the most about things because you don't advocate for yourself and then you go, oh, well, that didn't go so well.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, I've learned that over time is that you can't completely put your trust in the filmmakers because their mind is scattered in 100 different directions. The director is responsible for everything, and they can't always remember to focus on your safety. So that's something I would advise all actors, all performers, is make sure that what you're doing is safe because they might not have thought it through before they put you through it.
Yeah, because even a practice shot could have kept, Brendan Lee from being killed while he was making the grow. So,
Mm, right.
yeah, that's a great point, and I think something that maybe not a lot of people think of.
Hmm.
Um, my guess was going to be that you said no because I think that every experience you go through builds, to where you obviously are, which is, you're doing it and you're busy all the time. So, um, is there anything that people don't know about you that you feel like you would like for people to know about you? Or maybe, if not that, what would you like for people to think of when they hear your name or what your legacy would be?
Well, I think that my movies will live on long after I do. So I feel like I've carved out my tiny little niche in film history, and that pleases me. I was never a big star. I thought I might become an A-lister, but it just didn't happen. But I still feel like I have enough of a body of work that someday, some future college student might do his thesis on my work in horror films. So hopefully I will be remembered just for the silly entertainment that I've given people over the years.
Nice. Well, you are a scream queen, and so I think no matter what in the world of horror, you are an A-lister in
Yeah,
our.
thank you.
Oh,
Yeah.
did you want to say anything about like any of the stuff that you're going to bring with you to the event, or do you want to go like kind of talk about that at all, just to plug it in, or?
Okay. Um, at the event on November 1st and 2nd, Jill Sholin, myself, and Joe Bob will be bringing photographs and probably some DVDs, memorabilia for fans that can purchase if they want to. So I hope that you'll come out and support us.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Amanda. I really appreciate it. Have
Yeah, and I will meet you soon. Thank
Okay, good. I'm looking forward to seeing you there.
you. All
Bye
right.
bye.
Bye.